The level of rage and resentment that Donald Trump is experiencing has reached an all-time high. Perhaps a more accurate way to express it would be to say that his fury and assaults have hit a new rock bottom, mostly due to the fact that Donald Trump utterly lost control of himself and had a hysterical meltdown today while delivering a speech in Georgia, during which he began to threaten Michelle Obama. There is no doubt that Donald Trump has arrived at this stage in his life. And in the final days of this campaign, his attacks were not only vile and despicable, but they also demonstrate that Donald Trump is utterly falling apart. I would like to quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you appreciate our channel and want to support it, you can hit the subscribe button. It was an incredible breakdown, and we are going to get into all of it. However, before we do that, I would like to ask you to please show your support by liking this video. When I think about how much it means to me, I realize that it goes a long way. Now that we have that out of the way, let's investigate some of the beginnings of this collapse before we see Donald Trump really lose it with his threats to Michelle Obama. In the event that you are required to assert that you are the antithesis of a Nazi, what does this imply about you? In the event that you are required to refute that claim, which is quite obviously evident of Donald Trump and his fascistic proclivities, then what are you left with the situation? At this point in time, this is the final message that Donald Trump's campaign has to provide. And Donald Trump is denying that he is a Nazi while going through his enemy list, which we are going to get to in a moment. Kamala Harris is joyful and moving forward with programs, while Donald Trump's is going through his enemy list. Nevertheless, Kamala Harris is currently at the top of that list, and it is clear that Donald Trump was really displeased with her during this rally. This is something that we can see right for ourselves.
You're going to say, please say it, sir. I say, I will. Kamala, you're fired. Get out of here. Get out of here. Yeah. No.
What crime is it that Donald Trump wants to lock up Kamala Harris for? Where are we? We are at the point, again, where the crime that Kamala Harris has committed to Donald Trump and to MAGA is being his political opponent, not his political enemy. We don't need to use that charged language, being his opponent in a free and fair election in our democracy. That is the crime that Donald Trump thinks Kamala Harris has committed. And that is the mindset that he would have in the Oval Office. And that should absolutely terrify us. And that mindset, Donald Trump's cognitive decline as well, is exactly what Michelle Obama slammed him for this weekend. And so before we get into what Trump had to say about her, and it will shock you, I think we need to hear what Michelle Obama accurately said about Donald Trump.
And I'm talking to everybody out there, that too many of us are still confused and buying into the lies and distortions from people who do not have our best interest at heart. So I want to address some of these concerns head on. Because when you lay out the options, this choice isn't even close. But whether it's online or in the media or in our social circles, there are folks who say they're not sure about Kamala. They accuse her of not providing enough policy detail. Some wonder, do we really know her? Is she too aggressive? Is she not aggressive enough? There are folks sowing seeds of doubt about whether she's who she appears to be. Now, don't get me wrong. Voters have every right to ask hard questions of any candidate seeking office. But can someone tell me why we are once again holding Kamala to a higher standard than her opponent? We expect her to be intelligent and articulate, to have a clear set of policies, to never show too much anger, to prove time and time again that she belongs. But for Trump, we expect nothing at all. No understanding of policy, no ability to put together a coherent argument, no honesty, no decency, no morals. Instead, too many people are willing to write off his childish, mean-spirited antics by saying, well, Trump's just being Trump, rather than question his horrible behavior. Some folks think he's funny. And if you remember, that's exactly how he got elected the first time. Folks gave him a pass and rolled the dice, betting that he couldn't possibly be that bad. And then there were those folks who didn't think it really mattered who the president was, if you can believe that. And still others who thought it'd be a good idea just to blow up our entire democracy. Let us not forget how badly that worked out for all of us. Let us not forget the incompetence and the corruption, the chaos that was the cornerstone of his entire 4 years in office.
His mental state is becoming increasingly erratic. He is not feeling good. He has lost all sense of control. The year 2016 found him to be unfit. At this point, he is more unfit than he has ever been. It appears that he is losing his mind, since he is displaying aggressive behavior. In addition, this is the reason why he made this statement regarding Michelle Obama.
Report on November 5th. You know what's nasty to me? Michelle Obama. She was, ooh. I always tried to be so nice and respectful. Oh, she opened up a little bit of a box. She opened up a little bit of something. Oh, she was nasty. Ooh. Shouldn't be that way. That was a big mistake that she made.
To begin, it would have been an overstatement to simply claim that she is equally as vicious as Donald Trump was. But the insinuation that comes along with Donald Trump saying that she made a significant error, that she opened a box in him, when one considers what Donald Trump has done to those who he considers to be his enemies and what he is planning to do, as he has already stated, which is to send the military, the National Guard, locking up and attacking and deporting people who he considers to be his enemies from within, comes into play. In this way, Donald Trump is making a clear threat. It is not something that should be taken lightly, especially after what he stated right here, since that is an attempt to intimidate.
You know, she's not a nice person. Does anybody know that she is not a nice person? In case you had any ideas. Did you see she used the F word the other day? She thought she was talking without a camera on. She used the F word. Did you see that? Oh, it's terrible. If that ever happened to me, it would have been front page headlines. Oh boy. No, they got her using the wrong word, camera. She should be admonished for doing that, don't you?
The decision to not put Hillary Clinton behind bars was not yours to make. Unlike you, Donald, she did not engage in criminal activity. This is the reason why. On the other hand, this will not be the case if Trump is elected to a second term. It won't make a difference what you've done. In the event that you have disobeyed Donald Trump, your time is over. That is the plan that he has. That is the list of adversaries. And this is the thing that Donald Trump is constantly concentrating on. That is going to be his primary concern if he is elected president. That ought to terrify us, particularly because of the peculiar reasons he wants to go after people, such as you should think about the peculiar reason that he is stating about Kamala Harris right now.
You know, she's not a nice person. Does anybody know that she is not a nice person? In case you had any ideas. Did you see she used the F word the other day? She thought she was talking without a camera on. She used the F word. Did you see that? Oh, it's terrible. If that ever happened to me, it would have been front page headlines. Oh boy. No, they got her using the wrong word, camera. She should be admonished for doing that, don't you?
Suppose Donald Trump has continuously and repeatedly referred to Kamala Harris using profanity and derogatory words. Therefore, I do not believe that occasionally dropping a F-bomb should be grounds for impeachment. I have no idea what's wrong with him. He is not sure what he is saying. Perhaps his teleprompter had some issues. Here's what he had to say about teleprompters.
Lock her up. They scream out, easy, we won. We're going to have unity. I could have locked her up, but I didn't want to lock her up. She's the wife of the President of the United States previously, and she was Secretary of State. I said, that would be so terrible for our country. And then they try and do it to me. Isn't it terrible?
He keeps doing this, which just serves to highlight his lack of intelligence. However, I believe that his incapacity to read, cognitive deterioration, and frequent stumbling over his own words are all components of his broader uneasiness. Listen to what he said right here, in case you were tripping over his words. Donald Trump claims that we cannot enter World War II in an effort to incite panic about World War III. Donald Trump is obviously not a history buff because he preferred Nazi generals who had a long history of supporting Hitler. Yes, Donald, it was untrue. Donald Trump is the reason you should want him, not Nazi generals. We can tell from here that he was not a very intelligent person, that he was not a historian, and that he did not have a reliable account of anything. So the two Republicans tried to pursue you because of Democrats? No, I believe it was a couple of troubled people who were able to obtain weapons that they shouldn't have due to Republican policy. Because once more, Republicans will always prioritize their political and financial interests, as well as the welfare of their friends and donors, over the lives of Americans. That is the main goal of their movement. Donald Trump is all about that. And we're going to call that out on this show, as we have to do every single day. As always, you can click the subscribe button to show your support for that. If you're watching this video through to the finish, you can like it.
That is the group, I believe, that could determine this election.
Harris. Obviously, Trump is doing better with men. I think when we look back on this election, the big story is going to be the gender polarization. But what is interesting about the Moreno comments is this idea that the reason that women are breaking disproportionately for Kamala Harris is just because of abortion. That is wrong. Women care very much about the economy. They care about crime. They care about immigration. They care about all the same issues that men do. I think what's happening, though, is that the Republican Party, and Donald Trump specifically, has a strategy of trying to run up the numbers with men. That is why he picked J.D. Vance as his running mate. And in doing so, though, they don't just try to appeal to men. They are running a campaign that is actively alienating to women. It is not just about policy issues. It is about the way that J.D. Vance attacks childless cat ladies, which, by the way, in all of my focus groups, that has broken through. But that's not even as pernicious as the things that he says, like if women are with somebody who is abusive, they should stay with that man, right? We hear things like that from the vice presidential candidate. As you point out, Trump is an adjudicated rapist and has always been misogynistic. You've got candidates like Mark Robinson down in North Carolina, who says that he is avowedly pro-life, committed pro-life, except for the abortion that he paid for he and his wife back in the day, not to mention all of the other issues that he has, calling himself a black Nazi, pornography. I mean, just this, Dana White from the UFC, who had just been caught on camera hitting his wife, was featured, introduced Donald Trump at the Republican National Convention. I mean, the list goes on in terms of the way that this Republican Party creates a sense that women don't have a place in that coalition. And so for Donald Trump to treat them like the I am your protector is a particular form of gaslighting. It's almost like somebody who is an abuser, the way that they would then talk to the abused to try to keep them sort of encircled or ensnared by them. But based on the poll numbers and his dismal poll numbers with women are not falling for it.
You know, Sarah, I went and read the Sean Combs indictment today because I made this argument yesterday that when we look back, the story will be the enablers, right? The apparatus. And the Epstein story, right, is about an insane, sadistic man. But the story now that is covered is about the apparatus, the enablers who knew. The Combs indictment and the idea to charge a conspiracy and everyone aware and the people that procured the items is just legally fascinating to me. I'm not a lawyer. I mean, I didn't survive on The View because I didn't really know who any of these people were. But the way the law is charging conspirators, to me, is so fascinating if our politics can start to recognize political enablers, right, an apparatus. And what feels to me to be catching up with Trump is grab women between the legs, the 19 women that accused Trump. All this was information that was available in 2016. And for Trump, instead of doing things to ameliorate the perception that he's a misogynist and an unapologetic one, an adjudicated abuser and defamer of E. Jean Carroll. He defames her again after a jury of her peers finds him liable for that. Instead of moving to the center on abortion, which a lot of Trump supporters thought he would do. He's proud of his decision. And today's news on that front is that he's going to prosecute and jail anyone who criticizes those judges. No one has threatened judges more often than Donald Trump, but he's going to come after anyone who threatens the judges who decided Roe. And I wonder where there's sort of been narrative affirmation for the record, the years and the record of the public statements that start on Access Hollywood in terms of his political life, and that seemed to culminate in this gaslighting last night, as you said, the language of an abuser. I alone can protect you.
Well, this idea of the apparatus, I'm so glad you brought it up, because here's the thing. I've always believed this, that courage is contagious, right? Doing the right thing, speaking out against Trump, that's contagious, and that's how you build a permission structure. But you can also build a negative permission structure, because cowardice is also contagious. And this is the story of the last decade of the Republican Party. When Donald Trump, that Access Hollywood tape and the way that people handled that, it should be studied forever, because this was a case of in the immediacy of it. I remember Paul Ryan saying, well, I'm not going to appear with this guy. You know, Republicans ran from him quickly. They began pulling their endorsements from him. And then you know what they did over time when he refused to apologize or back down, just said it was locker room talk? They came back to him. And the story of the last, now getting close to a decade, is a story of Donald Trump doing the most repugnant, morally horrible things, and for Republicans time and time causing an insurrection, getting all of these felony counts, all of it. Republicans time and time again have chosen the cowardice permission structure and said, we're going to go back to Trump. And as a result, everybody's decided now, none of this stuff matters. But again, I go back to looking at the way that women are running from this campaign with everything they have. It does make me hope. My most fervent hope is that Donald Trump loses this election, and that he does it because women turn out in droves to vote against him, including center-right women, because that is just the kind of justice that Donald Trump deserves.
I couldn't agree more. I associate myself with everything Sarah just said. Claire, you live in a part of the country where people don't, assume that a Democratic candidate, ever is sort of viable there. And I'm not suggesting that Missouri's in play, but what I'm asking you is, are we seeing something transcendent in the Republican? I mean, the position of today's Republican Party is that while 20 and 30-year-old staffers have fled the campaign of a self-described black Nazi, the Republican leadership hasn't. I mean, Trump is still for him.
Early voting begins in Pennsylvania over the next 2 weeks, and we need each and every one of you to go out. Just don't take anything for granted. We have to win Pennsylvania. We got to get out and vote, and you can start right away. You know that, right? Now we have this stupid stuff where you can vote 45 days early. I wonder what the hell happens during that 45. Let's move see these votes? We've got about 1 million votes in there. Let's move them. We're fixing the air conditioner in the room, right? No, it's terrible. What happened the last time was disgraceful, including right here. But we're not going to let it happen again. Too big to rig, right? That's one way you do it.
For the life of me, I don't know what he's talking about when he mentions air conditioning in that soundbite. But that was Donald Trump. Telling his voters to vote early and then calling voting early a scam.
You will no longer be scared, anxious, the other things that he said there, and says he never thought he had a problem with women. Your response to that?
Well, it's patronizing. It's a little creepy. It's also, I think he does not seem to understand, and the Republican Party across the board doesn't seem to understand why they have a problem with women. I mean, Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, they talk about women like they don't know any women. Like they talk about women like women are this kind of foreign object. They don't talk about women like they're human. And, you constantly hear them degrading women, suggesting that, women over the age of 50 don't have any stake in some of these policy decisions. They don't seem to understand that the policies they're putting forward take freedoms away from women. Women across the board are motivated by that. They're concerned about that. And nothing that these guys are saying assuages any of those concerns. It's a really, really bizarre electoral strategy when they're running so far behind with women across the board.
Erin, Nikki Haley says, are you trying to lose this election? Now, she's speaking specifically about what Bernie Moreno said. But do you have moments where you wonder the same thing? I mean, what is the point of comments like Bernie Moreno made or Trump's making to women if the goal is to try to increase the number of women that you want to vote for you?
Yeah, I agree with Kate. It's a bit of a head scratcher that this is the line of attack that Donald Trump and Bernie Moreno are taking. Anytime we're not talking about the economy and immigration, Republicans are losing. And since the Dobbs decision, and this is something as a Republican woman I have seen time and again, Republicans have so struggled to be able to give the American people and the voting woman bloc public two answers. One, where do you stand at the state level about what you believe the term should be on abortion? You need to put down a definitive marker, or the left is going to go ahead and define that for you. And two, the easy answer for Republicans across the board when it comes to access to health care for women. If a woman is having a miscarriage and bleeding out, that's not a question. That shouldn't be a question in the 21st century, and it should not be a question for the Republican Party. And the fact that we have elected officials and people running for office in the Republican Party who can't state the obvious truth about access to health care when a woman needs her life saved boggles my mind. And I'm getting a little animated here because it actually flabbergasts me that Republicans can't speak the truth on this. We're already seeing women shift demographically more towards Democrats. If Republicans want to see a generational shift of women away from the Republican Party, we're doing a pretty good job on it right now.
Harry, what are you seeing in the numbers? I mean, you hear Erin's passion.
I hear that passion. And what I see, and she's talking about a generation, right? The new generation that's coming up. Look at the explosion in the gender gap among younger Americans. Look at this, age 18 to 29. This in the key battleground states. Of course, they're going to determine this election. Look at this. Men voters between ages 18 and 29. Look at that. Favor Trump by 10 points. Look at that. Look at that margin among women voters. Harris by 38 points. We can do some quick math here. That is a 48-point gender gap. My goodness gracious. You do not see that across the overall electorate. We are seeing women increasingly becoming more Democratic as you go lower down into that age spectrum. And so the women who are coming of age now are becoming much more Democratic than their older counterparts. But there is one little sort of twist to this that I want to introduce, right? When we're talking about the gender gap and we're talking about female voters going for Kamala Harris, I want you to look among married women and unmarried women. And you can see here among married women, it's basically even, right? Trump by a point. But look among unmarried women. Look at that. Kamala Harris up by 21 points among unmarried women.
Is going to tape a thing with Joe Rogan. Do you think she should do that?
I think that she should keep calling Donald Trump a fascist.
And we're back with the 2024 lead and headed to Battleground, Pennsylvania, where both candidates are pulling out all the stops. John King continues his special series, All Over the Map. And in this installment, he travels to the key suburbs of Philadelphia, the collar counties, to check in with people who voted for Nikki Haley during the Republican primary to see whether they've made a decision on whether they're going to stick Republican or do something else.
Berks County is a bit more away from the city, more rural, and more Republican, yet not as deep and reliably red as just a few years ago.
This neighborhood is becoming a lot like the Philadelphia suburbs. This is a primarily Republican-leaning borough, always has been. But when it comes to national elections, I do see more and more support for Democratic candidates.
Attorney Joan London switched her registration to independent after voting for Haley in the Republican primary. London was asked to join this local political program not long after our first visit 5 months ago. Back then, she told us she would write in a conservative because she viewed President Biden as too old. Later, she said she viewed Vice President Harris as too liberal and untested. But then she watched the Harris-Trump debate.
The last straw was what he said about the Ukraine, where he said that we have to have a negotiated settlement. For someone who claims to be a conservative to say that was, in my opinion, outrageous. It's appeasement.
So London is now voting Harris, voting Democrat for president for the first time, because she believes Trump must lose, because she gets the battleground state math.
I needed to vote against allowing him to become president again. I don't want it on my conscience that I contributed in some way to that. Sometimes you have to say, American first, conservative second, Republican third.
Media is in Delaware County, just outside Philly, reliably blue now. But still a test of whether Harris can match or exceed Biden's 2020 math. It's also a big test for Trump. He lost the Philly suburbs in 2016, but narrowly won statewide. But he lost these suburbs by a bit more in 2020, and he narrowly lost Pennsylvania.
We're getting to the end here. Have you made up your mind?
No.
Cynthia Sabatini is another never-Trumper, another Haley primary voter, another Republican who won't vote for him, but isn't sure about her.
Finish the sentence. Madam Vice President, if you want my vote here in the very important Philadelphia suburbs, you need to do.
You need to answer questions on point. You need to provide more details about your economic plan. You need to provide more details about your vision also for this country. I'm a bottom line person. I want details.
Over the final 11 days of this presidential campaign season. And it's where we start again today. Here at the table, New York Times investigative reporter Mike Schmidt is back, host of MSNBC's Politics Nation and president of the National Action Network. The Reverend Al Sharpton's here. Also joining us, political strategist, MSNBC's senior analyst, the man I call my human Xanax because of his read on polls, Matt Dowd is here. And former senior counsel to John Kelly, Kevin Carroll, is here. He signed a new letter backing Kelly's warnings against Donald Trump, along with other former Trump administration officials. Kevin, thank you so much for being here. I'm really grateful to get to talk to you and understand more of what you saw on the day that Donald Trump referred to veterans who had given their life, people like John Kelly's son, as losers and suckers.
I remember that day very well, Nicole. It was Memorial Day of 2017. I had gone to Section 60 to decorate the graves of some fallen men who I knew. And I saw the presidential limousine leaving, and I saw John Kelly standing very often on Memorial Day over the grave of his son. And I went over with my own son, who was 5 at the time. And he was visibly upset, which is not usually the way he presents himself. And I asked what was wrong, and he shook his head no and said he didn't want to talk about it. And my son was perceptive enough to see that this stranger was upset, and he asked him if he'd like to say a prayer. And my son and Kelly held hands and said some Hail Marys over his son's grave. And right after we got out of the administration, I was talking to General Kelly and just trading stories about crazy stuff that we had both seen. And he mentioned that Trump had said over his son's grave, what was in it for him? What was
mentioned? It's a blue state where there's a lot more Dems voting early. Harris going to that red state with Beyonce, her first appearance for Harris, who previously went to Beyonce's tour and then adopted her anthem Freedom at rallies. In Texas, over 3 million people have already voted. But it is only a political coincidence that both candidates are entering that opposing turf right now.
On Sunday, Donald Trump will hold a rally at Madison Square Garden. Yeah, just what New Yorkers need, more garbage around Penn Station. So, what the hell is Trump thinking about campaigning in New York? They told me I'm behind in Wisconsin, so I'm rallying in Madison Square Garden. It works. No, it works. Logically, it works.
That's how some of it's playing out on late night. The Texas appearance also draws attention to what the Harris campaign sees as a winning issue for her, how Republicans in that state have conducted extreme abortion crackdowns.
Women have died because of these bans, including a young mother of a 6-year-old son right here in Georgia. Her family is here with us tonight, and we speak her name, Amber Nicole Thurman. And you all have heard me say, look, I do believe Donald Trump to be an unserious man. And the consequences of him ever being president again are brutally serious.
Harris hammering an issue that for many voters is top of mind: abortion, women's rights, and what comes next. Now, Obama was at that rally, and he invoked his own credibility as a commander-in-chief to discuss the bombshell news rocking the Trump campaign.
The other day, General John Kelly, Donald Trump's former chief of staff, said that Trump told him he wanted his generals to be like Hitler's generals.
But certainly, the former president is in the far right area. He's certainly an authoritarian, admires people who are dictators. He has said that. So he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, for sure.
In politics, a good rule of thumb is don't say you want to do anything like Hitler. Now, I happen to know John Kelly and Mark Miller. They served under me when I was commander-in-chief. These are serious people.
I'm trying to imagine a chairman of the Joint Chiefs telling you that a former president is a fascist and a danger to this country is just inconceivable.
Well, and then he proved it.
The reason they're speaking up is because they have seen that in Donald Trump's mind, the military does not exist to serve the Constitution. He thinks the military exists to do his bidding, to serve his interests.
President Obama on offense there on those important issues last night. And remember, Trump has owned all kinds of controversial claims on immigration or being a dictator on day one. His campaign sees the Hitler story as too damaging to admit. Donald Trump and his aides are denying it, basically arguing Kelly is just some sort of disgruntled liar. And I will tell you, there are times in campaigns or news where a story has two sources or sides just debating it out. It can be kind of contested, like a jump ball. This is not that kind of story. We have overwhelming public evidence that Trump did make these outrageous Hitler dictatorial statements. We have his own plans and vows to abuse government power if he gets it. And we have witnesses that back up Kelly. 13 more, in fact, signing an open letter, backing up the general, joining the warnings. These are not random critics. These are not even just Republicans. These are people Trump picked who served and worked with Kelly. They stand on a record. They are not known for randomly lying or accusing people of fascism. The warnings come as Trump makes his own vows about what he would do out of the authoritarian playbook. We know he was caught trying to overthrow the last election. And October is a time when more people tend to follow politics and news. We actually have data on that. So what might sound familiar to news viewers, maybe even to you, is now being discussed and covered as a potentially new or with more detail for those people. That's how it's supposed to work. That's why, probably, I can tell you, reasonably, Trump and his folks are denying this rather than admitting it because they're worried people are going to find out about it. And Hitler ain't a good closing argument in any American campaign, even on the right. And this comes against the backdrop of a wider double standard, you may have noticed, when it comes to Trump and Harris. Reading from the Washington Post, I can tell you, political and media elites seem to bake into this campaign Trump's allowed to talk and act like a complete lunatic, Eugene Robinson writes, while Harris has to be perfect in every way. Or take Obama veteran Van Jones, who this week said it's a double standard where Trump gets to be lawless and Harris has to be flawless. Now, a very popular radio host, you've probably heard of this campaign cycle, Charlemagne, who just interviewed Harris, he's actually raised a similar point with evidence, and it's making the rounds this week, and it matters. And he's arguing the double standard goes well beyond just conservative outlets like Fox. He called out CNN on air over this in a discussion with Anderson Cooper, an exchange that raised some important points and did so quite candidly. And so we're going to air a longer bit of that right now in context.
He's showing us who he is every single day.
Yeah, which is a fascist. And it's crazy because you still don't have news networks having that conversation. Like when somebody says, when somebody questions Kamala Harris's blackness or is he a DEI hire, y'all will have roundtable discussions about that, asking that question. How come you're not having roundtable discussions asking, is Donald Trump a fascist? Actually, not even asking it, stating it. I mean, when you look at the things that he's talking about doing, jailing journalists, jailing his political opponents, turning the military on American citizens.
Do you think she needs to do more of that? Trump's going to go.
Needs to keep
Trump's going to go. Apparently, Trump's going on.
I've been around for a while. You've been in the political world. I've covered politics. That is also. I mean, that what has happened to Ronald Reagan's Republican Party? Right there, he not only talks about America being a shining city on the hill. He also talks about it being a city. If it has a wall, it has a door, and the people who have the wherewithal, the spunk, the fight to get here, that they're welcome here too. And you have Trump out there calling this country a garbage can because of immigrants coming here. I can't imagine you see America that same way. Don't you see it as the shining city on a hill?
I'll point to one of the other great phrases that Ronald Reagan ran on in 1980, which was "Make America Great Again," and that does sound awfully familiar. And when I hear Donald Trump talking about wanting to rebuild America, whether it's through our infrastructure, our economy, our energy, our military, I see him doing the exact same things. And even when it comes to immigration, the president was very clear during his 4 years in the White House. He was for legal immigration. He wants to stop illegal immigration. And so I think that is still with the door that Ronald Reagan was talking about, but open the door. Don't break through the window. Don't come in over the wall or under it. Come in through the door legally. And I think that's what President Trump's talking about.
I think if people look outside, I mean, we don't have to do a fact check. You could just go outside your house, look outside the door, look outside the window. It's not a garbage can. But all right, Mark Lauder, thanks very much. We appreciate it. We'll be right back.
Member of House Republican leadership, also a surrogate for the Trump campaign, Tom Emmer. Congressman, thanks for coming back in. Appreciate your time. So you have in this national poll, as Harry and John have been talking about, this national poll, the final national poll for the New York Times, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are in a dead heat. They are tied. ABC News has a new poll out this morning of voters. Then inside that survey, their survey found that half of the country sees Donald Trump as a fascist. Here's the quote, Congressman. 49% of registered voters in the national survey say Trump is a fascist, defined as a political extremist who seeks to act as a dictator, disregards individual rights, and threatens or uses force against their opponents. 49%. That is a high number. Does it worry you?
Kate, great to be with you this morning. Donald Trump is going to win this election, and he's going to win the election because the closing message has been the message all along. Kamala, you broke it. Donald Trump is going to fix it. Donald Trump has a positive message for the future, for Americans on the issues they care about most: the economy, the border, crime, the crises all around the globe. Donald Trump is here to fix those. He's done it before. He's going to do it again. That's why he's going to win on November 5th in 11 days.
Okay, so I'm gonna decipher. You're saying it does not worry you. To my question.
Again, what Americans care about, Kate, is the economy. It's been impossible for families to buy groceries, to put gas in their tank. They care about this wide open border, and the terrorists and criminals have been coming across our southern border.
And these two issues are absolutely
around
at the
the world
top.
that did not exist under Donald Trump.
No. My point is, so these issues are absolutely top of the list in terms of what you're listing out. Topping the list of priorities for voters. I have heard what I'm deciphering is a similar reaction from other Republicans to John Kelly, the latest John Kelly, Mark Milley coming out to say that Donald Trump they see fits the definition of a fascist. The reaction I'm getting from Republicans is that this is baked in with voters, that it's not going to matter to their vote. Are you personally okay if Donald Trump says that he wants his generals to be like Hitler's generals?
Kate, again, Here, when you talk about this stuff, you want to talk about anything but what the American people care about.
That's
the
not
American
true.
people care
That's
about
not
the
true.
economy.
You
The American
and I have
people
been on
want to make
together a
sure.
bunch of
Yes,
times.
they
No,
do.
no, no,
They
no,
want to
stop,
make
stop,
sure
stop,
that their
stop.
kids
Stop, stop, stop.
have a better future.
You and I have
That's
been on together a
absolutely
bunch
true,
of times.
Kate.
We talk
And by the
all
way,
the time.
it's
We
also
do talk about
inappropriate
issues.
for you to suggest that only Republicans are worried about this. It's all Americans. That's why you're going to find out in 11
Republicans.
days.
I said topping the list of
Donald
voters
Trump
are
will be the
absolutely
next
care
president.
about these. We're doing this thing again. All right, let's do this. The question was, let's make a deal. I ask this question, you answer it, you answer the actual question, and we'll move on to another issue. Let's try it this way. Are you personally okay if Donald Trump says that he wants his generals to be like Hitler's generals?
Americans do not want to talk about that. They want to talk about the economy. They want to talk about the border. They want to talk about settling the problems all around the world, Kate. You guys want to talk about anything but that. Donald Trump is talking about the things that matter to the American public. She broke it. He's going to fix it. That's why he's going to get elected on November 5th.
One, you know that's not true, and I know you know that's not true because you and I've covered you for a long time. We talk about all of the issues. You know that. I know that. We just did an entire town hall with Kamala Harris talking about all of these issues, so we can put that to rest. Let's talk about Fred Upton. He's a man you know well. He's a man that's
talking about those issues.
New denials from Donald Trump after that damning reporting in the New York Times and The Atlantic claiming Trump spoke positively about Adolf Hitler and said he wanted generals like Hitler's. Trump now says that never happened.
The Atlantic is reporting that you said that you wanted the kind of generals that Hitler had. Is that something that you've ever said?
No, I never said that. I would never say that. It's a rag that he made up stories. He's done it before. It's a failing magazine. Right before the election, it's just a failing magazine.
Is that something that you said?
Never said it.
And with this election neck and neck, the Harris campaign is seizing on General John Kelly's comments and amplifying them in a new ad.
He admires people who are dictators. He commented more than once that Hitler did some good things too.
If he was left to his own devices, would he be a dictator if he didn't have people around him?
Oh, I think you'd love to be.
When somebody's the president, the authority is total.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
With us now, Matthew Dowd, senior MSNBC political contributor who served as chief strategist to the Bush-Cheney 2004 campaign. Matthew, always good to have you here. Is this the ad and the issue that could motivate those soft Republicans who don't like Trump but are hesitant to back Harris?
I mean, you never know in the final days of a campaign what could actually cause a 1 or 2 point shift. In my view, this is one of those types of things that could cause a 1 or 2 point shift in a race. I remember very well in 2000 when the DUI came out against Bush. It didn't change people's votes from George Bush to Al Gore. What it did was demotivate the Republican base, and that changed it by 1 or 2 points. That, to me, is the likely scenario of this, which is it demotivates some Republicans who don't like Trump already, and they basically just say, I'm not voting for him.
We have seen this week more and more Republicans endorse Harris, including former Michigan Congressman Fred Upton, who called Trump unfit to serve. Also, Waukesha, Wisconsin Mayor Sean Riley, who is in a reliably red county. Also worth noting, Liz Cheney, who's already campaigned with Harris, now set to go on the trail with Michigan Democratic Senate nominee Alyssa Slotkin. I wonder just how impactful could these types of endorsements and Cheney's help be?
I think there's twofold in why they matter. I mean, I wouldn't say on their own they're going to shift votes, but what they do is there is two ways. First, it sends a signal to those independent voters who don't like either party that here's a candidate, the vice president, who's willing to work with both sides, and both sides are supporting her. And that's actually a good signal for independent voters to hear, as who say, don't like either party. The other thing is this continues to build momentum on the vice president's behalf. And my view in this race at this point is whoever motivates their voters the best is going to win this race. That's why I have a view that she's ahead and is likely to win, because her voters right now are more motivated than his voters. But we have, 10 days left in this. And these kind of things help with motivation.
And the voting has begun. We are now getting a look at the early vote turnout. Already more than 30 million ballots cast. Nationally, more Democrats have voted overall so far, which is consistent with past elections. However, Matthew, in key battlegrounds like Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, so far, more registered Republicans have voted than registered Democrats. What's your takeaway there?
Well, I think what the Republicans finally decided that they were opposed to early voting in 2022 and 2020, and they realized it was dumb. And so they have pushed voters that were normal election day voters to vote early. And I think that's the shift you're seeing. It's not new voters. I saw an analysis done yesterday that showed of the new voters that are voting that hadn't voted before, 2 out of every 3 are Democratic voters. 2 out of every 3 voters that are voting early are Democratic voters. So the Republicans aren't putting new voters in. They're basically cannibalizing election day voters and moving them to early vote.
It'll be really interesting then to see what it looks like on election day and how those registrations shift based on who's showing up and who comes before. It's certainly more convenient to just mail in your vote or go when you have time if you have multiple days when you can do it. Let me ask you before I let you go about your social media post yesterday. Quote, VP is winning this race. She is winning nationally. She is winning in a majority of the swing states, and she is winning the early vote. Kind of bold to put that out there considering the polls show a dead heat right now. What's driving your optimism?
Well, I have a tendency, and I've analyzed polls for a long time, as you know, and I worked with polls in 2000 and 2004, and I've watched people's anxiety and nervousness raise. You have to throw out the bad and sort of biased polls, which there's quite a few this cycle.